I'm Dr. John Gartner.
And I'm Dr. Harry Segal.
And welcome to another session of Shrinking Trump.
John, this is our 54th episode. We
Insane.
started this show because John and I are both clinical psychologists, and we were very concerned about Trump's symptomatology, his early signs of dementia, his severe personality disorder, which includes sociopathic criminal behavior and compulsive lying. And we were warning about the dangers of what would happen if someone suffering from malignant narcissism actually took control of the government. And we also knew that Project 2025, a blueprint for destroying democratic institutions and centering power in the executive, we knew that Trump's people had been working on it for 4 years. And so after the devastating election, even though John had been predicting a very, very quick road to destruction, and I was a bit more optimistic, we actually have seen a lot of these things happen. And so on this show, we're keeping track of what he's doing, but also trying to be aware and to convey to all of you our understanding of how things are going from a psychological point of view. Right, John?
Yes. And I want to respond to that. But first, I just want to let the audience know that I'm going to be on vacation next week. So we won't have a show next week. I'm going to announce it at the beginning, and we should announce it again at the end, because for those of you who watch us regularly, you know, the week before last, we did not appear. And people became quite concerned, and they were actually right to be concerned. It was YouTube censoring the Really American channel, which is, I think, something of great concern going forward, since if social media decides to censor the left-wing people, there's really no recourse, actually, and we lose our voice. But getting back to what you were... But we're still here. But getting back to what you were saying, I was thinking about, you know, a theme for this week, and I think one of them is Trump just can't keep friends. He really just can't keep friends. You know, he broke up with Elon Musk. He's embattled now with Putin. And I just want to mention one other person that we're not talking about on the show this week, but Leonard Leo, the head of the Federalist Society, who was the one who picked all these Trump judges, right? The reason he's like cursing out Leonard Leo now is because of what you pointed out, Harry, the last few weeks, which is some of the Trump judges have actually some weird vestige of a conscience. They haven't turned into a zombie yet. There's still some humanity left in them, and they have ruled against him. And that has made him insane. And so now he's turning on Leonard Leo. I mean, listen, man, they can't all be home runs. They can't all be secret agents for Operation Evil, right? Some of them are actually actual judges.
Actually, all of them are jurists. Almost all of them are real jurists who were very conservative, which is not the same thing as being MAGA. Now, some are MAGA, but some are strict jurists, and they're saying no. And Amy Coney Barrett is really getting the most vitriol because she hasn't been shilling for Trump, because actually she has a conscience. I've always thought she would. And she's been really changing. So, yeah, no, Trump can't tolerate any loss.
Right.
That's part of his pathology, right?
Right.
You know,
it's not enough that you might kill 10 people for him. You got to be willing to kill your own brother.
Well, there's that, but also look, you know, if I teach a course, a seminar, and the teaching ratings are fairly good, but someone hated the course, I'm concerned. I'll look at it. It might hurt my feelings, but I'm not going to suddenly feel attacked and strike back and say, what is this monster writing this review of me? Trump can't tolerate disappointments. He can't.
And this is also part of the authoritarian playbook. I mean, that there are constant purges, right, of people who won't go far enough, who aren't psychopathic or, true believers enough to do anything, right? So if there's a line that you won't cross, then at some point you are going to be crossing swords with Trump.
Right. Any disappointment, any setback, any insult, any criticism, he went after Rand Paul and threatening to primary him because he'll threaten anyone.
Right. Exactly. So you wanted to talk a little bit about Mikey Johnson and the big, beautiful bill?
Little Mikey Johnson. I think our audience knows that that this guy makes my skin crawl.
Nice, Mikey Johnson.
He really makes my skin crawl. And I think it's his demeanor and the way in which he lies, which is just so reasonable. Like, how could you?
Yeah.
So I ended up watching a really wonderful episode of, well, they're all kind of wonderful, of John Oliver's last week tonight, and he had dug up this clip of Mike Johnson, who was working for the foundation in 2005, who were claiming there was a war on Christmas, that you couldn't say Merry Christmas, you had to say Happy Holidays, something the right was like obsessed about, and no one else knew what they were talking about because lots of people say Merry Christmas. I think Bill O'Reilly built his fan base with it. It turns out that little Mikey was at that time a spokesman for that company, and here's him talking on Fox News, and then they cut the coverage to go to something else. But here he is. I want you to get a look at him in his true form.
We've seen a great backlash against retailers who have banned the saying of Merry Christmas, and certainly more and more Americans are realizing how easy it is to stand up against this improper censorship. Many people are visiting our website at saychristmas.org, and they're learning the facts, learning what the law really says, and that's a big step in this.
Mike Johnson, senior attorney and spokesman for the Alliance Defense Fund. Thank you very much.
Saychristmas.org.
He looks like a friendly humanoid alien on Star Trek, doesn't he? Mm-hmm. It's just there he is, and yet you can also see how talented he is. The audience is going to hate me when I say this, but
people are realizing how easy it is to say Merry Christmas. You know why they're realizing it? Because it's never been hard.
It's never been hard. But there he is, very self-assured, as 20 years younger than he is now, and with a terrible haircut. Now look. Becoming speaker in this environment was incredibly difficult. No one thought he would last a week, and he's lasted several years because he may be one of the most skilled speakers of the House in a long time. That doesn't mean I like him. I'm not endorsing him. I hate him, actually, but because I find him, he's unctuous, But,
unctuous is a good word.
Oh, isn't it? And he was on Meet the Press, and there's Kristen Welker, who's always saying, "Thanks for coming on." And there he is, just doing his unctuous thing.
Well, and also he's a skilled liar. I think that's the thing, because what you're going to point out is the 3 statements and the 3 lies, but he does it so smoothly.
Oh, and it's just like, well, wait a minute. We're just trying to save Medicaid. Like this, we're just here. So, and it really is effective, I think. So let's look at the first clip with Mike Johnson on Meet the Press.
Well, I convinced my friends and colleagues by use of the facts. I sent a long text message to my good friend Elon Musk after he made those comments the other day to explain this is not a spending bill. This is a reconciliation package. It is reconciling a budget. So there is some additional spending, as you noted earlier at the opening, for national security, for historic investments in border security, the largest in generations, because those are necessary expenditures. But what my friends are missing is the tremendous and historic level of spending cuts that are also in the same package. So a lot of the analysis that people are pointing to is from groups, for example, like the Congressional Budget Office, the CBO. They have projected anemic economic growth. They're assuming a growth level of 1.8% over the next 10 years. Kristen, never in U.S. history has the U.S. economy sustained less than 2% economic growth over a 10-year period. What's going to happen here is exactly the opposite. We're going to have historic growth because we're basing this on the history of the recent past.
Senator Ron Johnson, Senator Rand Paul. Why doesn't this bill do more to address the debt and deficit, Mr. Speaker?
Yeah, well, listen, I agree with my good friend Ron Johnson, for example, a lot of the comments that he stated about government spending. We have a north of $36 trillion federal debt right now, and it is the largest national security concern for the U.S. I am a fiscal hawk. Many of my Republican colleagues in the House feel the same way. But we didn't get in this situation overnight, Kristen. It took us decades, many decades of Congress's, frankly, mismanagement of the public fisc to get in this situation. And the last 4 years of the Biden administration increased spending dramatically. So it's going to take us a while to get out of it. We can't flip a magic switch and reverse it overnight. But this is the largest step forward in the right direction that Congress has ever made. I liken this to an aircraft carrier. You don't turn an aircraft carrier on a dime. It takes a mile of open ocean. This is the biggest turn in that wheel that we would have had in generations. And this is the first of a number of steps. This is a key point. This is not the only reconciliation bill. We're going to have a second budget reconciliation bill that follows after this, and we're beginning next week the appropriations process, which is the spending bills for government. And you're going to see a lot of the DOGE cuts and a lot of this new fiscal restraint reflected in what Congress does next. So stay tuned. This is not the end-all be-all. I tell my friends, my fellow fiscal hawks, we've got to get our fiscal house in order, and this is an incredibly and historic first start.
There's almost nothing true in what he just said.
Yeah, it's the opposite
My fellow fiscal. This adds between $2 and $4 trillion. It extends the Trump tax cuts from 2017. It adds no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, and no tax on Social Security, which is actually good for the working class, by the way. That was very smart. But it also balloons the deficit. It's just everything he said isn't true, but he says it with that kind of, well, Kristen, we just have to do it, and it's going to be, it's a start. So let me just show you, if I can, John, and then I want your feedback on this. This is a fact check from the New York Times. False. The Congressional Budget Office and a number of independent analysts have estimated the bill would balloon federal deficits by well over $1 trillion, even when economic growth is factored in. That's what Mikey Johnson said. That the CBO didn't include growth.
Lied about
the Budget Office estimated an increase in the deficit of $3.8 trillion. The Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget estimated $3.1 trillion, including interest. The Penn-Wharton budget model, $2.8 trillion, and the Tax Foundation, $1.7 trillion when factoring in economic growth.
And so he's totally lying.
Totally lying.
And the thing is, really, this bill is bad in almost every way it could be bad, because it's a massive adding to the deficit when we don't have a crisis. There are times when we do add to the deficit in war, and that's where deficit spending can be very valuable. We're just pigs at the trough. But the other thing that makes this bill so bad is it really is robbing from the poor to give to the rich. The taxes are actually going to go up for the lowest tenth of the population, while the richest people are going to be making tens of thousands of dollars. So, he's talking about fiscal responsibility. What he's really saying is we're kicking all the poor people off all the programs and we're taking all the money. That's not fiscal responsibility. That's just robbery.
Well, with the exception of those tax, the Social Security tips and overtime, and also no tax on loans of cars that are made in the U.S. Trump very intelligently just came up with those on the campaign trail when he was in Las Vegas, because everyone's working for tips. He added all these things that now that everyone else has to do, and they're terrible for the deficit, right? They're probably good for his voters, and I like them as long as he wasn't extending the Trump tax cuts for the wealthy another 10 years, right? Yeah. I mean, in other words, those should have expired. Then take some of that money and give it to working class people who need it. Yeah. But no.
So it's the 3-card Monty they do again. It's the biggest deficit in history, but it's really actually, I texted my friend Elon with the facts. It's not a spending bill. Yes, it is. It's not a deficit bill. Yes, it is. It's not, we're not kicking him in. And if Medicaid, yes, you are. I mean, it's like everything he says is false, but it's also just a really cruel and stupid budget. It's cruel because it hurts the weakest people and feeds the fattest, greediest people. And it's stupid because it's going to sink the overall American economy, because what people don't understand is the result of those deficits is America pays a higher interest rate on its debt, which means that more and more of our tax GDP is just going to go to debt service. Not to mention the fact that the interest rate for everyone is going to go up because they're linked to the 10-year bond. And so if people don't want to buy the 10-year bond because we look insecure, or our deficit makes us look like more of a third world nation, and also our politics make us look shaky, less people want to buy our bonds. They're not as much the secure gold standard. It means we have to pay our higher interest rate. That means billions, tens of billions of dollars are just going to pay the increased interest. And it's not only the government that's going to be paying it, it's every single one of us when we buy a car or a house or take out a business loan.
No, it's terrible. And also, there was a time when the Republicans were at least were saying, look, we've got to stop this adding to the debt. I mean, we're going to be paying more on the debt than we are for the rest of the budget. And if that continues, we really will see the end of American leadership financially in the world. So they're right. Everyone's right to be complaining about it. But Republicans used to, at least, right? I'm not saying they should cut entitlements, but they used to say, let's reorganize everything. Republicans now like entitlements. They like Medicaid with Josh Hawley, right? They like Social Security. I'm all for that, but they don't want to touch defense. Right. And they don't want to cut taxes on the wealthy. So really what they're doing is we're going to cut more taxes for the wealthy. We're going to leave entitlements alone, except for Medicaid, because that's for poor people. But we'll leave Social Security, Medicare intact. And we'll pretend that we're budget hawks, which.
Well, I was going to say, we're in a post-truth reality now, right? We're in a post-truth reality. And that's where people like Mike Johnson do so well. We're actually spending like drunken sailors, but we're just going to tell everyone we're fiscally conservative. That's all. So we're just going to do the opposite and just say we're the opposite.
Let's listen to what he says about Medicaid.
Yeah.
Does the House bill put rural hospitals and, frankly, the most vulnerable Americans at risk?
No, and you can underscore what I'm about to tell you. There are no Medicaid cuts in the big, beautiful bill. We're not cutting Medicaid. What we're doing is strengthening the program. We're reducing fraud, waste, and abuse that is rampant in Medicaid to ensure that program is essential for so many people, ensure that it's available for the most vulnerable. It's intended for young, single pregnant women and the disabled and the elderly. But what's happening right now is you have a lot of people, for example, young men, able-bodied workers who are on Medicaid. They're not working when they can. That drains resources from the people that need it most. And so what we're doing here is an important and frankly heroic thing to preserve the program so that it doesn't become insolvent. This is not going to hurt rural hospitals. There's a lot of flexibility built into this. They keep saying that 7.6 million people is the figure that that is supposedly going to be affected by this. But when you look at those numbers and you break them down, this is high on public opinion polling. You're talking about 1.4 million illegal aliens that are receiving Medicaid right now. They're not entitled to that. This is for U.S. citizens in those vulnerable populations. There's about 4.8 million people that they're referring to that are able-bodied workers. If you are able to work and you're not, and you are riding on the public wagon, you need to help pull it. And by the way, Kristen, this is no draconian requirement. All we're requiring in the legislation is 20 hours a week. You can volunteer in your community, you can be in a job training program, or you can get to work. And this is my message to young men around the country who are taking advantage of the system. It is abusing the system. We're going to fix that, and I'm telling you that is a very popular thing among the American people because it comports with common sense.
Do we have a fact check on that?
We do. False. Again, the House bill would reduce federal Medicaid spending by hundreds of billions of dollars over a decade and reduce enrollment by 10 million people. Mr. Johnson's figure of 1.4 million unauthorized immigrants enrolled in Medicaid is also incorrect. Unauthorized immigrants are not eligible for federally funded Medicaid except in emergency situations. States are required to verify immigration status to determine eligibility. Some 78 million people were enrolled in the federal Medicaid and Children's Health Insurance Program, or CHIP, in January, the latest month with available data. But 14 states and the District of Columbia use their own funds to provide insurance for undocumented immigrant children. And 7 of those states also extend coverage to some adult immigrants like pregnant women. The House bill penalizes those 14 states and DC by reducing their share of federal Medicaid funding. So the 1.4 million is ridiculous.
A lie. Right.
The 4 million young men who are in their basements playing video games isn't true.
Lie.
And they're cutting billions of dollars from it. And that the really nasty thing is, if you're a state that's devoting resources to helping any immigrant children or pregnant women, then they cut half of it. And that's the threat to rural hospitals that people talk about, right? Mm-hmm. Because really, the funding to pay for immigrant health care is how the states are subsidizing their hospitals. It's not about, oh my God, they're treating millions and millions of illegal immigrants. It's not. We're talking about children, but that's how the states justify what they're doing. So then this bill cuts all of them out, 14 states, and there are many other nasty things. Not just the work requirement, which Mikey Johnson says, well, it's just it's actually a nightmare. You have to prove that you're working. These are often people who are on the edge, who are struggling to get by. It's never worked. It's been tested in a number of states. It's never been effective. It's never changed anything. I've worked with people on Medicaid. I know exactly what they're talking about. So it's just a lie. And he says it with like, no, Kristen, why would anyone say that? I'm Mike Johnson. I just really believe that me and the president were very close, and I'm very, very anxious, and I believe in myself, and I have a slight Louisiana accent, and so I'm kind of folksy, but also like a school teacher who's just telling you what's up. Yeah. It's so dangerous. This guy he's way too effective for my taste.
Yeah. So he could open the Mikey Johnson School of Lying. Because he's so good at it. He could give lying lessons.
Oh, he's really extraordinary, isn't he? I mean, I think he's a really gifted politician.
Yeah,
which is not
actually
so much.
All right. So we're talking about the Trump, Zelensky, and Putin.
Yeah. I don't know if you guys are aware of this. You probably are. But on Sunday, Operation Spiderweb was this incredible military victory on the part of Ukraine that was in the planning for 18 months. But when I heard that he had accomplished this, it really incredible. He took out like a third of the Russian Air Force, basically of their top planes. It made me remember that event in the Oval Office, which is what Trump has been doing. You know, he keeps having leaders the Oval Office, brings in the press, and then humiliates them because, after all, that's fun. And what
that's
he
what makes life worth living.
and he did that to Zelensky, and famously said, "You don't have the cards." And just to remind you, this is what it looked like.
You're right now not in a very good position. You've allowed yourself to be in a very bad position, and he happens to be right about it.
From the very beginning of the war.
You're not in a good position. You don't have the cards right now. With us, you start having cards. Right now, you don't. You're playing cards. You're playing cards.
I when I heard about this incredible thing that that Ukraine pulled off, I thought to myself, he did have cards.
Yeah, I guess he had some cards face down that we didn't see.
Wow. And look at his self-control. He didn't even hint about it in the Oval Office. I could imagine someone more impulsive saying, "We have more cards than you realize, Mr. President." He didn't. Like Obama, the night that he attacked Trump at the correspondents' dinner, the next day, the attack, that he was going to get bin Laden the next day and knew it. And there he is at the correspondents' dinner putting Trump down. This is kind of like that. It's really pretty extraordinary. Let's just show you what this attack really looked like. So large-scale Ukrainian attack targets air bases in Russia. Russia's defense ministry said on Sunday that Ukrainian drones attacked airfields in 5 regions and that several aircraft had caught fire. These were not, by the way, just 5 aircraft. You guys remember what AWACS planes were? These are very sophisticated planes that we sold to Saudi Arabia. Reagan did 40 years ago. These are like that, highly, highly sophisticated planes. And I think I think Russia has 6 or 7, and Zelensky took out 2 or 3 of them. I mean, it's really an extraordinary thing. Let's just, folks, I'm sorry if you're just listening to this, but we're going to show a map of Russia and show you where these bases were taken out. They are literally all over, from near Moscow to the east, near Murmansk, to the right. I mean, all the way over at Irkutsk and Amur. This is, Russia has like 5 time zones. They hit all over Russia, and they did it by smuggling drones on in trucks. Yeah, very carefully placing them in certain parts in Russia, and then launch them at the same moment. So all of these bases were hit at once, and the beauty of it is that the Russians were completely caught with their pants down. They had no security on these places. They didn't think that Ukraine could do it, and then yesterday, the Ukrainians took out the bridge that connects Crimea with Russia, which is an incredibly symbolic bridge for the Russian events, and they blew it up from underwater. And I'm sorry, folks, if you're listening, but we're going to show a clip of it happening. And it's a clip that shows it twice because it makes me feel so good. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Oh, man, that's so satisfying. I look, most wars in our history are complicated. One side's been doing something awful, the other side's doing things that are really awful, and there's a battle, or there's the horrible turmoil of Vietnam and the complicated stuff going on in the Middle East. But this battle is Russia attacking an innocent a neighbor unprovoked. It's just vicious. It's a land grab. They've killed millions. They've killed 1 million people. They've stolen children and taken them to Russia and re-educated them to be Russian. I mean, to see these guys strike back, and you know what? And it may get very dirty, but they didn't attack apartment buildings in Moscow. They took out air bases and supply depots.
Yeah, that's a good point. One of the things that's so interesting about this, Max Boot, who's a conservative columnist, wrote a whole article about it, but now everyone's writing articles about it.
He's so smart.
He is so smart. He talks about how this has amazing implications. This is revolutionizing warfare. Now, all of a sudden, basically they took out, I looked it up to get the number, $7 billion worth of aircraft with about $200,000 worth of drones.
Right.
Okay. And history is actually full of these kind of inflection points where a weaker opponent wins a war by fighting it on different grounds. The first thing I think of is the American Revolution. Because I wrote about Alexander Hamilton. When Alexander Hamilton was about 20 years old, he was manning a cannon, in Battery Park, right? And one night when the sun came up in the mist, what Alexander Hamilton saw was the largest armada ever assembled in human history. The British fleet that sailed to America to put down the rebellion was the largest fleet that had ever sailed anywhere in the history of humanity.
Wow.
That's the kind of overpowering force, right, that they entered with. But in those days, people fought wars where the armies lined up horizontally, across from each other and fired. And of course, Washington knew we couldn't win a war like that. So he became a guerrilla warfare person, basically. We're shooting at them from the hay bales and running away, or attacking the Hessians, at 5 a.m. on Christmas, crossing the Delaware with no one noticing. So we started to use this kind of tactics, actually the same kind of tactics that caused us, the overpowering empire, to lose in Vietnam. So what's happened here is a game changer for war in general. And actually, now people are starting to realize our bases are vulnerable. For example, the Chinese seem to be buying up a lot of farmland near a lot of bases, and we didn't know why. We thought they were just listening in. Well, actually, it's very easy, we realized, to smuggle these tiny little, toy planes, smuggle them into a large country, right, and hide them in a barn. It's really not that hard to do.
I agree with you, and it really puts, Trump's stupid Golden Dome idea, this plan to build a shield, which makes sense for Israel, but it doesn't make sense for us, because who needs an intraballistic missile if you can use a drone? And the Ukrainians, by the way, they developed and built their own drones. I mean, this was their technological innovations, and you know what? Necessity pushes innovation. I want to say one thing about Vietnam, though, John, before we go any further, which is something that I feel was the lesson of Vietnam that people always forget, which is occupying a territory never works, because first of all, it means you have to put people down and keep them down, so that corrupts the people who are occupying. And also, the occupied people can always wait you out. I mean, that was the problem with the American Revolution. They could send an armada, but then they'd have to send another one because we're not going anywhere. And
the problem
Ukraine,
with our war in Afghanistan.
Exactly. Or think of and that's why in Iraq, even though we should never have done that war, Petraeus' idea was don't occupy, pay them all off, build their roads. Like, don't occupy, just support them so that they're not wanting to kill us. And then Ukraine, I mean, Putin thought he could march in and take Kyiv from Ukrainians. Are you out of your mind? I mean, he wasn't thinking at all. And even if he had managed to take Kyiv, he'd have to occupy that country with that population.
And now they're going to start hitting Russia. They're going to start hitting. I mean, they have started hitting Russia, but they're going to continue that. And as I think we talked about last week, Europe and America is removing the range limitations on the ballistic missiles that they're selling or giving to Ukraine. So now those missiles will have enough range to hit Russia. We learned that before we even learned about this drone attack. So they are and then there was the rolling up of the bridge. So they're finding ways to bring the war to Russia, and it's a very effective strategy, because that's going to make them really pay a price for the war. Because they don't care if there's a war off their soil, but if it's on their soil, he's going to lose more public support.
Agreed, and I think there's a third one coming. I really do. I think that if you're planning for 18 months, you plan for 3. You have. I might as well, right? And yes, the U.S. and the Europeans have taken off the range restriction on the long missiles. which means you could actually hit Moscow, which we prevented the Ukrainians from doing. Biden's administration prevented them from doing it, and so did Trump until recently. Now, here's the thing we have to talk about for just 1 minute is Trump still hasn't, at least as of this filming, hasn't made a comment about it. The White House did admit that they weren't told in advance about it, which of course they would say that so that Russia wouldn't think that we were hiding it from them.
Well, it must be true, Harry, because if we had told them, they would have told Russia.
Exactly. Absolutely. And this gets back to this thing that John and I keep talking about, which is Trump literally a Russian asset? Or is he a Russian asset who doesn't think he's a Russian asset? Because what we have here is Trump still hasn't crossed Putin. He's angry at him for not coming to the table, and he wants the Nobel Peace Prize. But what he has done is green-lighted Lindsey Graham to set up reciprocal sanctions on Russian oil, which is huge. It's the one thing we've never done, which means that China and India would be punished for buying Russian oil. It's the first time that will ever have been done. And Lindsey Graham says he has 87 senators, and the House has a majority. And I think we all know, don't we, that this wouldn't happen unless Trump wanted it to happen. Because I think that I was going to say, hey, Vlad, look, I'm not doing it. I mean, they're going to pass it in the Congress and I can't veto it. It's not me. Maybe you should do something about how you're conducting the war, Vlad, if it's okay. And you don't show that P tape to anybody like that.
Yeah. Well, Harry, there's a third possibility, though, between you say he's either a Russian asset or he's kind of in his mind, he's actually a useful idiot, because in his mind, he thinks he's the big poobah, but actually he's being manipulated and used. There's also the kind of a simpler explanation, which is, I keep coming back to The Sopranos. Anything you ever need to learn about the Trump administration, you can learn from The Sopranos, right? So if the big boss, everyone's deferential to the big boss. Yes, boss. Yes, boss. Yes, boss. Anyone want to kill the boss? They're yes, boss, until they decide to kill him, right, and take over. So there's no honor among gangsters. There's submission, right? But that's not the same as, friendship, right?
It's not about friendship.
Yeah.
With Trump, it's never about friendship. But Putin hasn't responded either. It's very interesting. He's been humiliated. Absolutely humiliated. And we'll see if it moves anything. I don't have much hopes for it. I think it's going to go on for a long time.
But there is a sense of hope, though, in this intrepid creativity, right? It's kind of like we've talked about how sometimes we lose hope, right? But we also don't realize that in history, things happen, right? There are reversals. There are there are discoveries. We got the bomb before the Germans did. If in the other round, it would have been catastrophic. But things change. And so this is feels like a little bit one of those change points. We thought we were leaving them for dead, and well, wait a minute. No, they've come up with a whole new technology, a whole new way to fight, and Russia doesn't even have an answer for it.
They don't, and their soldiers aren't really motivated to fight. They're just doing what they're told. The Ukrainians are fighting for their lives and for their autonomy and their integrity. I so admire them.
Yeah.
Well, John.
Speaking of things we admire, you want to talk more about Harvard.
Yeah, the war against Harvard, and John and I have talked about Trump's rage at elite institutions, because that's where anti-MAGA thought comes from. It's DEI and liberal and all that stuff, and anti-Semitic, which is it's a ruse. It's a red herring. It's a red herring. It's not a real thing. I mean, I'm not saying that Harvard didn't have to do some work about anti-Semitism on campus. It did, but you don't fix that by taking it
canceling
over,
the cancer research.
right? And destroying it, like taking away its tax exempt status, from demanding that they can review all hiring for the past 5 years of all faculty. Things that Harvard could never
no longer enroll international students. Oh, thank you. Oh, are they going to blame the Jews for that now, that they can't enroll any international students?
Well, it keeps Israeli students from coming over. So isn't that anti-Semitic? It's all such, really, folks. I don't swear that much, but it's such bullshit. It's just just a power grab. It's just trying to torch the university. That's all it is.
Well, look, it's something that every authoritarian does. Every authoritarian has to attack all the democratic institutions, has to attack all the experts, and that includes attacking the judiciary, attacking the universities, attacking the press, attacking the scientists. I keep thinking about Mao. This is so much like Maoism, that they were so anti-intellectual. They took all the professors and put dunce caps on them and made them work in the fields like peasants, so that they could do honest work. Last week we showed a tape of someone from the Trump administration saying, well, they want to fund trade schools, not all these hoity-toity, universities that are curing cancer. So the anti-intellectualism, though, it really is so central to the whole fascist movement, right? To destroy knowledge and truth itself. So that if there is no knowledge and there is no truth, the truth is whatever the crazy, evil dictator says it is.
Agreed. But what's so interesting and horrifying is that the Trump people, and this is, we're going to be speaking to our friend Ahmed Baba a little later in the show, and one of the things we talked about, we'll be talking about and putting out right now, which is, the administration will find loopholes, like things that no one would ever think of doing.
I know.
That aren't, I mean, canceling contracts is actually against the law. There's going to be court cases against canceling $100 million of contracts with the government and Harvard. That's actually not legal. That will be overturned. But canceling grants? Sure.
I don't think people saw this coming. The kind of scorched earth quality of it, to cancel basically all the research grants for the whole country. Basically, at one point they said we're just not paying anything on any grants. Right? We have to review them all. I mean, the kind of scorched earth. Really just cutting everything off at the knees. It's not even selective. Or, for example, this idea that now they're basically going to try to make it impossible for 1.1 million foreign students to come to this country, or they're canceling their interviews while they review their social media review policy, and then they'll review their social media to see if they're going to. Basically, they're just trying to choke off our access to the rest of the world and the rest of the world's access to us. And it's an amazing brain drain. We're losing the best and the brightest who now can't come here from other countries. And some of the best and the brightest that are here from our country are going to other countries. So look, the country with the most smart people wins, okay? The country with the most education, the most innovation, the most research always wins. And, what we're doing is we are literally committing suicide. We're destroying the source of our own strength, our own soft power, our own ability to be the beacon, to be the country that everybody wants to come to learn from. Adds enormous value to us. We get the best and the brightest coming here with their ideas and their energy. Instead, now we're just telling them all to go somewhere else. And it does double duty because it also starves the universities of money, because those foreign students pay full tuition, and it's a double, for them, it's a double play. It's racist and it's anti-intellectual. It's two evil bills in one.
But it is, and also it's closing down the country, so it's just Trump and his power and his ideology, and nothing else matters. Right. Because if you have foreign students, you have foreign ideas. If you have, you have freedom of speech, then you have anti-Trump speech, which is, of course, what we're founded on as a country.
But, well, I think we're going to have to go to court so we can say Happy Harvard again.
Jesus, so listen, now Stephen Miller, who is really a caricature of an evil bureaucrat, right? I mean, he is just amazing. So now he's going up against Harvard Law Review, the most respected law journal in the country, which, by the way, is going to piss off the Supreme Court justices, many of whom went to Harvard. You're going after the Law Review. Good luck when this comes down to a judicial decision. They're not going to win on this one. But here's what Stephen Miller did. A Stephen Miller staffer and tough talk inside Trump's latest attack on Harvard. This is from the Times. The Justice Department opened an investigation into the student-run Harvard Law Review. The startling accusations show how the Trump administration is wielding power in pursuit of its political agenda. The Justice Department quietly approached Harvard University last month with startling claims, even by the extraordinary standards of the Trump administration's months-long assault on the elite college. The department signaled that it was reviewing claims of discrimination against white men at the Harvard Law Review and accused the renowned publication of destroying evidence in an open investigation. The administration demanded that Harvard, quote, cease and desist, unquote, from interfering. In a series of letters that have not been previously reported, the government also disclosed it had a, quote, cooperating witness, unquote, inside the student-run journal. That witness now works in the White House under Stephen Miller, the architect of the administration's domestic policy agenda, Trump officials confirmed. But the aggressive language in the letters from the Justice Department's two top civil rights lawyers appeared to have overstated the allegations in pursuit of an additional way to punish Harvard. In that way, the episode fits a broader trend in how the administration is wielding federal investigatory powers to impose its political agenda, from reshaping the economy to ramping up deportations to punishing the nation's elite law firms and universities. Mr. Trump's government has repeatedly prized speed and shock value over the kinds of methodological steps typically taken to build a legal case. The investigation of the Harvard Law Review offers a glimpse into the strategy. The Justice Department's not-so-subtle threats help persuade the Law Review to agree to at least some of the government's demands, which were delivered in 3 letters within 10 days in May. A detail not included in the correspondence: the Justice Department's cooperating witness had taken a job inside the White House. Now, John, I just to remind our audience, because I'm sure you know this, but in law schools, after the first semester of law school, the top students are then appointed to the Law Review. It is the most prestigious thing you can be in any law school. It usually guarantees you some kind of good summer internship or clerkship. And to be on the Harvard Law Review is considered the pinnacle. And most of the Supreme Court justices who went to Harvard, Yale, or wherever were on the Law Review. Barack Obama was the first African-American president of the Harvard Law Review. And this is the institution that Stephen Miller.
You just put your finger right on the problem when you said Barack Obama was the president of the Law Review, because I'm just thinking, how long, Lord? How long must the white man suffer? How long?
You know, I've been struggling my whole life as a white man, John. You know, I just wanted some advantages, just some privileges, and it's sad. And finally, someone's fighting for you and me.
Finally, someone's fighting for our right to have better privileges than everyone else.
You know, it's really something. And Stephen Miller, I know I talked about how much I hate Mike Johnson because I find
That's okay.
him
You can hate more than there's so many hateable people in this administration.
It's true, but Mike Johnson, I really hate the unctuousness and the superiority and the condescension in his voice. Like, well, we're just strengthening Medicaid while you're gutting it. But Stephen Miller is a really vicious character. He's kind of like Corey Lewandowski, except a little smarter, but not that much.
He's a Jewish Eichmann.
Well, it's really something. He has been an extreme right-wing commentator since high school. He was on a right-wing radio show in high school, and then when he went to college, he was at Duke, and he took these extreme positions on immigration and on political structures, and kind of palled around with white supremacists. So he's been doing this for a long time, and he really has Trump's ear more than anybody. He's considered now the most powerful. In that Signalgate thing going on, you remember that with Mike Waltz had let Goldberg on that. Is it Goldberg or Greenberg? I always get it wrong. From the Atlantic, Jeffrey Goldberg, right?
Yeah, Jeffrey Goldberg.
So Goldberg and Vance and all those people, and Vance was saying, why should we be doing this attack to support Europe? And then Miller came on the line and said, this is what the president wants us to do. And then everyone shut up. I mean, he's very, very powerful. And I wanted to try to talk about him for a minute. And I think I mentioned this before, but I'm a huge fan of the Hysteria channel, a part of Crooked Media. I just love the women on this network because they're so funny. So I thought I could kill two birds with one stone, which is to give you a glimpse of Erin Ryan if you've never seen her before, but also her takedown of Stephen Miller is part of a series that she and her co-host have dubbed This Fucking Guy, which is a show each week about some corrupt person that they hate, and they're always right. Here's just a minute of what they have to say about Stephen Miller.
Miller is a Trump gadfly, but unlike many previous subjects, Miller seems to actually believe what he's saying, or at least he wants us to believe that he believes what he's saying, because as he's alluded to in at least one interview, triggering the libs with his bad opinions is the only thing that gives his life meaning. But I cannot stress enough that despite the fact that he tries very hard to shock people, the overall effect is tiresome.
The story of Stephen Miller is one of an unremarkable man, not good looking, medium smart, sexually repellent, not funny, who, like many others in Washington, wants to be interesting. And since he can't embody any of those other superlatives, he's chosen to be the most obnoxious.
I'm sorry, they just...
it's interesting, though, you say, we've talked about all the people Trump has had fallings outs with. And so then Stephen Miller really is someone who's had, in a sense, a lot of longevity. And I think it's because he really does channel Trump's deep Nazihood. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
His deep racism, right? His deep white supremacy. I mean, like they say, he really believes it. You know what I mean? So he's really kind of embodies Trump's id in a way that makes him kind of a unique figure in a way. I mean, we have other people like Homan. There's lots of racists who want to rough up immigrants, but there is some way in which he is kind of like a cipher, right, for the pure Nazism of the regime.
I agree with you, and if you also think about Miller as Trump thinks about people, Miller is unyielding, uncompromisingly tough.
Yeah. Right.
He gives no ground. He attacks people every time he speaks. He's the guy who came out and said, yeah, we can take away habeas corpus. This is the guy. And he's unyielding and he's vicious. And he's always been this way. He's been doing this since he was 15. And yeah, that's the kind of person Trump has actually had longevity with. You're absolutely right, John. It's fascinating.
Well, we haven't talked about Trump's malignant narcissism that much lately, but I want to get back to the fact that he's still crazy after all these years. And one of the things that marks how crazy he is, and we can talk about whether he believes this or whether this is for effect, but he's always been someone who has latched on to conspiracy theories. And it's important people understand that malignant narcissism has 4 components, and one of them is paranoia. So people who have malignant narcissism are very prone to believing crazy conspiracy theories. And the more their illness progresses, because malignant narcissism is a progressive illness, according to Eric Fromm, the more fantastical their paranoid fantasies become. So let's see the latest paranoid fantasy that Trump has been posting about. So here's something that he reposted. There is no Joe Biden. He was executed in 2020, and Biden clone doubles and robotic engineered soulless, mindless entities are what you see. Wow. So, I mean, I have to say, I remember when we were talking about how crazy Trump was, and it's not like he's wearing a tinfoil hat and he's saying that radio waves are coming into his brain, from aliens, because if he was that crazy, then no one would follow him. But then we also said his illness was progressive. So at what point would he get so crazy, right, that everyone would have to be like the emperor's new clothes, like wake up and go, wait a minute, this is really nuts. Well, we keep thinking there's a bottom, and then starting to wonder, is there a bottom? Because if you're saying that Biden has been executed and he's been replaced by a clone and a robot, I mean, that's just nuts. And, it got reported on, of course. Trump amplifies outlandish robot Biden conspiracy theory. President Trump reposted another user's false claim that the former president had been executed in 2020 and replaced by a robotic clone. President Trump shared an outlandish conspiracy theory on social media on Saturday night, saying former President Joseph R. Biden had been executed in 2020 and replaced by a robotic clone. The latest example of the president amplifying dark, false material to his millions of followers. A New York Times analysis of thousands of Mr. Trump's social media posts and reposts over a 6-month period in 2024 found that at least 330 of them describe both a false, secretive plot against Mr. Trump or the American people and a specific entity supposedly responsible for it. They included suggestions that the FBI had ordered his assassination and accusations that government officials had orchestrated the Capitol riot on January 6, 2021. So not only these conspiracy theories, he's pointing to someone, right? That this crazy conspiracy is being run by this person. So it's one of the ways that he can attack his enemies is by amplifying these fantasies that they're behind all of this non-existent plots.
And if you don't think that he really believes that, and I personally don't think he does, but what he does want to do is dominate the news cycle. And he does that by saying outrageous things that gets everyone talking. There's also that. Remember, he has to be thought about at all times.
It's like eating the cats and the dogs,
Exactly. Didn't matter that it was stupid and crazy.
Yeah.
He dominated the news for a week and Kamala lost points.
Right. So it works for him.
It does.
Paranoid psychosis works for him. Then there's just one little thing I wanted to show, which is so he has now an official portrait of himself hanging in the White House. And I'm sorry for those of you who are just listening, but I want you to just to see this portrait because I think it's like character just absolutely is destiny. It absolutely, you can't make this stuff up. You can't not reveal yourself. This is the man's official portrait. So for those of you who are just listening, he has a very menacing, threatening look. There's a completely black background, and he's sort of in a shadowy kind of half of his face is in shade, and he has this kind of arrogant, threatening smirk. It kind of reminds me of his mugshot, which he also has hanging in the White House. But I mean, it's just such a dystopian picture. I just felt I needed to show that.
I agree with you, John, and I think it's brilliant. I do. He looks like a hero of the of the MAGA world. He looks like almost like a movie star, like, an old aging movie star playing a commando, that kind of thing. I hate to say that it's effective because it turns my stomach, but and the narcissism is off the scale. I mean, let's not even. I don't disagree with you, but I thought the mugshot was a terrible idea because he made so much on that mugshot. He won that round. We all thought he's got a mugshot. How can he become president? He's now got a mugshot. Well, he's president and he was convicted of a crime. I mean,
it's like it is sort of like we've lost the force of gravity. Like nothing matters, nothing brings him down to earth. Nothing that all the things that would have been absolutely shockingly disqualifying, somehow we've just normalized them. Like, yeah, all the presidents have mugshots. All the presidents have felonies. No, they don't.
Well, and there's some guy that I forget what post he's once appointed to, but he's proposing making January 6th a national holiday.
Oh God.
Putting Trump on Mount Rushmore, that kind of thing. It's terrifying. But anyway, what do you have next for us, John?
Well, one of the other things that came out in the news, and there were rumors about this, people have talked about it. I actually did not say much about it because I didn't feel like we have proof. But as it turns out, Elon Musk, his behavior, we talked about having a manic quality, jumping up, screaming, waving a chainsaw, doing things in such an aggressive and reckless, breathless, way, talking about how he's staying up all night and they're putting cots in their offices so that they can work 24 hours a day. And well, as it turns out, Musk has been high all this time. He's like a polypharmacy drug abuser. Let's look at that article. On the campaign trail, Elon Musk juggled drugs and family drama. As Mr. Musk entered President Trump's orbit, his private life grew increasingly tumultuous, and his drug use was more intense than previously known. As Elon Musk became one of Donald J. Trump's closest allies last year, leading raucous rallies and donating about $275 million to help him win the presidency, he was also using drugs far more intensely than previously known, according to people familiar with his activities. Mr. Musk's drug consumption went well beyond occasional use. He told people he was taking so much ketamine, a powerful anesthetic, that it was affecting his bladder, a known effect of chronic use. He took ecstasy and psychedelic mushrooms, and he traveled with a daily medication box that held about 20 pills, including ones with the markings of the stimulant Adderall, according to a photo of the box and people who have seen it. So, I mean, this is what this has come to. Not only did we give this private citizen, who had no government position, total access to the government, where he could just barge in, take over all of the databases, right, and terrorize, all of the federal employees and harass them. But he was in a drug-fueled mania, in a drug-addled state. It's like, it's like Hegseth, like, oh, he's an alcoholic, but it doesn't matter. If the person in charge of our military is a drunk, who cares? No, it matters. Okay, because when people are under the influence of drugs, they do crazy things, and they act crazy, and that's exactly what happened. And so it's just part of the kind of downfall of civilization that we're giving all this power to someone that we know is completely out of his gourd. High.
Absolutely out of his gourd. Absolutely, and no, it's horrifying, isn't it? It's absolutely horrifying. But we saw it, and I don't know if the audience remembers, but John did a routine with the chainsaw before Elon Musk brought a chainsaw. I mean, here's John saying, "Here's an absurd extension of what Elon Musk is doing," and then Musk did it.
Right. Crazy. That's true.
Absolutely crazy.
It's art imitating life, or life imitating art. Yes.
There you go.
Well, but there's something even more scary about the way Elon Musk has invaded all of these databases and put in back doors and God knows what else, because there's something that I think many people are not aware of. A lot of stuff we've talked about today, I think people are aware of in the news, but this is really kind of a submarine that's kind of under the surface that I want people to know about. It's called Palantir. Trump appears to be building an unprecedented spy machine that could track Americans. A new report shines light on contracts with tech company Palantir, which could create data profiles of Americans to surveil and harass them. As Donald Trump and his administration pursue crippling austerity measures across the country, they're plunging millions of dollars into the president's pet projects, and that includes reportedly giving hundreds of millions of dollars to a company that is expanding the government's ability to spy on its own citizens. The New York Times has a new report on the administration awarding contracts to the controversial tech company Palantir, which is apparently helping Trump develop a database of Americans' private information scraped from various government agencies that could theoretically be used to track or persecute them. Quote, the push has put a key Palantir product called Foundry into at least 4 federal agencies, including DHS and the Health and Human Services. Widely adopted Foundry, which organizes and analyzes data, paves the way for Mr. Trump to easily merge information from different agencies, the government official said. Creating detailed portraits of Americans based on government data is not just a pipe dream. The Trump administration has already sought access to hundreds of data points on citizens and others through government databases, including their bank account numbers, the amount of their student debt, their medical claims, and any disability status. Mr. Trump could potentially use such information to advance his political agenda by policing immigrants and punishing critics, Democratic lawmakers and critics have said. So this is really a nightmare, right? That the government would essentially be able to use all their electronic resources and databases to essentially spy on every single American.
It's so frightening, and he's got it all on flash drives. I mean, they have all the information.
Yeah,
and we don't know what they're going to do with it. But it can't be good, and it depends on how far along the coup will proceed. Right? It depends on how far it progresses, rather, because the more power he has, the more he'll be able to use information like that to silence critics, manipulate markets, do all the things that he really wants to do.
Have a tax audit to anyone who says anything bad about him, because they'll probably merge it with social media too, in the master. And by the way, Palantir is a Peter Thiel company, just in case you were wondering. So that's all I was going to say about that. The last thing I want to talk about is immigration. I keep wanting to talk about this because this really is the most horrendous crime against humanity that's taking place in our country. But today I wanted to be slightly more positive amidst the negativity, which is, and I really don't know how this is going to turn out, but I've been asking this question for months and months. What are people going to do? Right? If they're sitting in a restaurant and they grab someone and pull them out, right? If they come into their community and grab their neighbor, if they come into their school and start taking children, what are the people going to do? Look, these people are wearing masks, okay? And they have no identification. So we don't know who they are, what agency they're with. And it gives them a certain Stasi-like impunity. It gives them a certain Nazi-like impunity to be as violent and vicious as they want to be, because nobody knows who they are. There's no accountability. And all of these things that you see on TikTok, they're body slamming, 90-pound women, you know what I mean, by these people, but they're knocking them down. They're being extremely aggressive because they don't have to follow any rules of procedure. But anyway, here's a couple of clips of people pushing back.
Excuse me, can I ask you what the nature of this is?
No,
Don't worry about it.
No, I am worried about it. I'm asking you what the nature of this is.
Do not walk up on me.
No,
you're going to get arrested.
I'm not going to get arrested.
Do not walk up on me. You're an active law enforcement scene right now, man.
Yeah.
You need to leave. Go across the street.
I'm not going to leave.
You have. Well, you can be arrested just the same.
I will not be arrested.
It's called interfering.
I will not be arrested. I'm here as a citizen, and I'm videotaping this. I will videotape it. I will be here. This is illegal. What's happening here? Not in our community. This is illegal. You're not welcome. I'm getting your license plate. No.
I love like that woman just faced down those officers. You're not going to arrest me, and I can videotape this, and I'm going to be right here. And they
left.
They left.
Right, and they left. She's great. She's so great.
She's a hero, whoever she is. And here's someone talking about them trying to pull kids out of school.
ICE just tried to abduct a bunch of kids and parents right here at Somerville High School, and so many community members showed up that ICE just left. Remember, you are the major power in your community. If you show up with people you trust quickly, you can protect kids, you can protect families. So form information networks, know where ICE is in your community, and show up. They will just leave. They are not fucking brave enough to steal kids when an entire community comes around to protect them. So show up for the kids in your community.
I just feel so heartened by ordinary citizens standing up to these Nazi thugs with masks.
That's great.
That's where the rubber's meeting the road right now. You know what I mean? We talk about resistance, right? These are the barricades. This is the front lines. Okay. And it's taking place, in every community in America.
No, it's incredible. I also heard a report today that the Trump administration is directing all of these agents from different federal agencies to then work for ICE and do all of this. And there are people in the Justice Department who are furious, saying it's taking away investigations of serious crime.
Sure.
Because Trump and Stephen Miller, our favorite Nazi, pulled in a meeting of ICE people and said that the people who were arresting the numbers in the bottom 10%, those people would be demoted or fired. That they had to get the numbers up.
Yeah. So to make them more aggressive and more boundary breaking and law breaking, just to be stormtroopers, just to do it, just to kick down the door, smash the window, knock people down, pull them out. Don't give identification. Don't have a warrant. Just kidnap them and throw them in the back of an unmarked car. Does this sound like America? I mean, it's really, really bad. Well, the other incident I just want to talk about, it was not as positive. It took place in front of a building in New York City on Varick Street. It's actually a building I know because Gerald Nadler's congressional office is in that building. And back when we were trying to pressure the Congress to open an impeachment investigation in 2019 to the Russian collusion, and the Democrats made a horrible, I think actually a fatal mistake in not opening an impeachment inquiry right away, day one. If this guy is a useful idiot or an asset of Russia, that there is no more important issue that would justify a congressional investigation. Other than an A-bomb being dropped on one of our cities, I can't think of a more important issue. And yet they let it go because it wasn't polling well. And Nancy Pelosi thought we should focus on kitchen table issues. And I literally had the chance to argue with her about this face-to-face. And of course, it did nothing. So I went all the way to New York to organize a protest in front of Nadler's office. Why? Because he was the head of the Judiciary Committee, and he had the power to personally. He had the personal authority to open an impeachment investigation, but he wasn't, and he wanted to, but he was not doing it in deference to Nancy Pelosi, but he had the power. So we saw that as a possible inflection point or possible pivot point where maybe we could move the needle. Of course we didn't. So we were protesting outside of his office because his office is in this Varick Street building, but also one floor down from him is an immigration court. And one of the things that they're doing now is sending immigrants letters saying, look, you need to come for your hearing. This is your immigration hearing. And so putting them in this impossible position. If they don't show up for their immigration hearing, well, then they've kind of forfeited their asylum case. But when they do show up, they're not letting them have the hearing. They're just kidnapping them right there in the courtroom, right? They're supposed to be coming before a judge. They're online, right, to go in front of the judge, but they're kidnapping them and taking them and throwing them in a car before they can have their due process. So a protest surrounding this Varick Street building developed, and it started out reasonable, and we actually had Representative Goldman speaking to the crowd.
I was a federal prosecutor for 10 years right there. I worked with the Department of Homeland Security. I worked with ICE agents. I worked with Homeland Security's investigations. I have never seen any plainclothes officer wearing a mask. And I asked them, why are you wearing a mask? One person told me, because it's cold. I asked him if he would testify to that under oath, and he walked away and wouldn't respond to me. Another person admitted that they're wearing masks so that they are not caught on video. And my question to them is, if what you are doing is legitimate, is lawful, is totally above board, why do you need to cover your face? Law enforcement officers do not cover their face. And in fact, the Trump administration is cracking down on universities for allowing protesters to wear masks. So apparently it is not okay to wear a mask if you're protesting the government, but it is okay if you are the government to wear masks and in order to shield your face from the public.
I think this is such an important point. And when you think about masked, armed thugs, right, kidnapping people and throwing them in unmarked cars, right? You're thinking about dictatorships, and paramilitaries that are having their way with people. This is America. I mean, really.
Yeah, John and I are old enough to remember the junta in Argentina, where they disappeared thousands and thousands of people. And if you ever want to see a phenomenal movie, check out Missing with Sissy Spacek and I'm blank. Oh, come on.
That's right.
Anyway, it's one of the most wonderful films about the junta and about a very conservative father who's really angry and comes, having fought with his son and is changed by eventually finding out about his son's death.
Right.
And
actually, one of the things that brought down that government was the grandmothers, right? Where the mothers stood in front of the official buildings with pictures of their children, said, "Go ahead and arrest us. Go ahead, because I'm standing here to hold vigil for my son." And you're going to arrest all the mothers, and they didn't have the guts to beat up the mothers, and it was one of the things that changed the tide.
Yeah, it was Jack Lemmon, by the way, who starred in the film, and he's extraordinary. And Sting wrote a very important song about these women dancing with photographs of their husbands who had been disappeared. It's an extraordinary song. So yeah, art and movies and journalism can make the difference. I never thought I would live so long as to see people in this country, masked figures without warrants, beating up people, arresting them without warrants, without due process, putting them on airplanes. I'm ashamed to be living in this culture. Never thought.
And scared.
I'm
scared.
Absolutely.
Well, things got worse. Things got worse on Varick Street because, of course, the ICE agents became brutal.
You will be placed under arrest on the charge of disorderly conduct.
Protests erupted into chaos Wednesday night outside the federal immigration court in Soho. Officers and crowds clashing over barricades. About 24 protesters taken into custody for charges that include obstruction of government administration.
People say, oh, let them come in legally. And when they try to come in legally and follow the court proceedings, they're being kidnapped.
The protests come hours after witnesses report several people were taken into custody inside the ICE field office in Lower Manhattan.
I've been working here for a couple of years, and I've never seen either this many agents, let alone agents dressed in plain clothes, wearing masks, pulling people out of line. It's totally out of the ordinary.
Under the Trump administration, advocates say it is becoming increasingly common for ICE to arrest and detain migrants at their immigration court hearings. It's what happened to a 20-year-old Bronx high school student last week.
It's a catch-22. You don't show up for your court hearing, then you're also then could be ordered removed from the country.
The Venezuelan student, identified as Dylan, was arrested by ICE at the federal immigration court in Lower Manhattan, where he showed up for a hearing on his asylum request.
They mess with the wrong people when they're messing with New York City kids.
Naveed Hassan, a parent on the city's Board of Ed, says he's been fielding calls from worried immigrant parents.
The school was actively trying to help figure out how to get him back, and we're working with them, with the guidance counselor at the school. The mom is deeply involved in working together.
It's a travesty. Never thought I'd live to see it. I never thought I'd live to see it.
Never thought you'd live to see it. I mean, really, I think sometimes we become cynical, or it's hard for us to be shocked, right? Because we've just seen one shock wave after another. But I really do want us to take a breath, right? And just really realize how breathtakingly horrible this is. What a degeneration that we have literally become. We're really on the verge of becoming a banana republic, of becoming Argentina, during that junta. We're really on the edge. And by the way, the incident at Varick Street got worse. Remember I told you about Gerald Nadler's office? I told that story in part because it was something that I related to because I experienced it, but I mentioned it for another reason, because someone from Nadler's office was observing what was taking place in the immigration court and expressed some concern about the anti-constitutional, anti-habeas corpus, anti-due process, anti-democratic police state tactics that they were using. Well, of course, what was their response?
Lying story about what happened. DHS was upset that some of my staff members were watching them grab immigrants emerging from an immigration court in the same building, a floor below. And they were upset that my staff invited some of the observers up to my office. They then came up to the office and demanded entrance. One of my staff members said, "You can't come in here, you need a warrant." They said, "No, we don't need a warrant," which is incorrect. And they barged in, and in barging in, one of the officers, a very big, heavy-set fellow, pushed my aide, a very petite young woman, and they then said that she pushed back, and they shackled her and took her downstairs.
I mean, they're arresting congressional aides for observing or talking to observers of their crimes. And by the way, you saw a lot of NYPD involved in those melee scenes. Remember that originally New York was not going to cooperate with this Trump immigrant crackdown, but Eric Adams, the corrupt mayor of New York, made a deal with Donald Trump. They would drop the corruption charges that were filed against him if he would lend them the NYPD to support their Nazi cleanup operation. Okay. And that's exactly what they're doing. That's why you're seeing, and the NYPD can be very aggressive. There's lots of now of little TikTok videos of the NYPD front and center, pushing people around and getting aggressive because that's what they're told to do. So I just want to say here, we've talked about all the people you hate, Harry. I just want to say officially, for the public, for the record, fuck Eric Adams. Fuck Eric Adams. Okay? Because he's fucking with my city. So fuck him.
I think
That's
it's time to let's give him the Flying Fickle Finger of Fate Award, Rex.
And now it's time to give the Flying Fickle Finger of Fate Award.
But John, I just want to make one little correction. They didn't drop the charges. They dropped the charges temporarily.
So they could hold it over him.
Exactly. And Tom Homan, the thug who runs ICE, actually said so. Said he's our puppet.
Huh.
So there you are.
That's the equivalent. That's their P-tape.
They got him. They have him by the neck. If he doesn't go along with it, they'll bring back the charges.
Well, I just want to end with somebody on social media posted a very trenchant quote from Catch 22, and I really thought it is very appropriate for this moment. So if you don't mind, I'm just going to read that quote. This is from Catch 22 by Joseph Heller. Quote, "It was miraculous. It was almost no trick at all. He saw to turn vice into virtue and slander into truth, impotence into abstinence, arrogance into humility, plunder into philanthropy, thievery into honor, blasphemy into wisdom, brutality into patriotism, and sadism into justice. Anybody could do it. It required no brains at all. It merely required no character."
That's actually a speech. Well, it's a monologue given by the chaplain in Catch 22, who's a wonderful, both weak and perceptive character, who Yossarian cares about. The very first sentence is that Yossarian, it was love at first sight when Yossarian saw the chaplain, and he becomes really the moral center of the novel. And by the way, folks, if you haven't read it, it's the most wonderful thing. You should definitely read it. And how accurate that double speak is that it's talking about.
Yeah,
it's pretty
really prescient. We didn't realize that this was going to be narrating our future. Well, too big size, folks. Sorry, but that's where we're at.
Hey, John, you know who we have today?
No, who do we have?
One of our favorite recurring guests. That's who. Some of you, a lot of you have mentioned how much you like him, and we actually have such a blast. We're looking forward to having him back. He may be our most recurrent guest, or maybe tied with George Conway. I'm not sure.
Yeah,
but
maybe he's tied. Yeah, he's becoming like a morning. He's becoming like a Morning Joe guest. You know, one of these sort of parts of the extended family that meet every day.
Well, we're very lucky to have him. His name is Ahmed Baba. He is a journalist and really an expert on all kinds of things within the political arena. An astute observer and. It is super smart and eloquent, which is what you want from a political commentator. You can find his writings on Ahmed Baba news.com. I have to ask him again. I just went out of my head because I'm old. And just the spelling AHMED, Baba, BABA. And we're just really glad to have him. So welcome, Ahmed.
Thank you for that introduction. I mean, that's high praise. That's a high bar. I'm also being tied with George Conway in anything. It's crazy.
Well, you know, it's not exactly like the number of times you posted Saturday Night Live, but it's almost as prestigious.
Pretty much. I mean, maybe more so, to be honest. I'm happy to be back. I love hanging with you.
Well, we're happy to have you. You really are a friend of the show. We always have great conversations when you're here. You know, actually, when I was thinking about the fact that you were coming today, I was going to ask you kind of half jokingly, so how's Project 2025 going?
Well, it's still going. Miraculously or unexpectedly. I mean, obviously, there's some things going on now with Musk being out, and again, like just on that note, we predicted that, like every conversation. You know, we've done this enough times now. A lot of the things we said were going to happen played out. Remember the big conversation we had about how they were going to eventually weed Musk out, and then Russell Vought was going to take charge of the Doge effort.
Mhm.
We're seeing that, and that part of Project 2025 with those cuts, the agency dismantlings, that's still very much ongoing with Russell Vought here, and they're still plugging away. Over 40%, according to the Project 2025 tracker, has been implemented or pursued. So that is still going down.
Yeah,
unfortunately.
Well, in case people didn't know, I know you're an expert on Project 2025. You really read up on it quite a bit before the election, and so I think in that sense you were less shocked than most people by the fact that, hey, they did write it down, guys. It's a playbook. They're following the playbook. It shouldn't be such a shock, but it is. And I think people are shocked by the rapidity of it. Like, for example, what's happening now with institutions of higher learning. This is really a war on science and a war on education, and they're not taking any prisoners.
Yeah, no, that's a really key point of it, because like a lot of Project 2025, obviously there's the fossil fuel aspect that's been being implemented now with the environmental rollbacks. There's the immigration side, but this attack on higher education and education itself is a big component of it, like the dismantling of the education department, which has been in progress or attempted for the last couple months now, and then now this war on Harvard. And also this use of anti-Semitism as like a smokescreen to target student visas. That's a part of Project Esther, another heritage project, Heritage Foundation project, which is to use and exploit, the anti-Semitism as a means through which to target these student visas and to target universities. And they're using it against Harvard. They use it against Mahmoud Khalil. And it's this attempt to twist these higher education, higher learning facilities into arms of right-wing ideology. They know that the education system informs people. And when you're more informed, you're less likely to believe nonsense that leads you down the path of MAGA, right? So I think that's part of their long-term project, and it's been part of the conservative project for a long time now.
Yeah, and it seems that autocrats almost always go after institutions of higher learning. John and I are on the same page, right?
No,
right?
Exactly. Yeah. They go after higher education. They want to control all means of independent thought. They want to make sure that they have, because there's these robots. If they say people go into college and become liberal, it's happening because they're being exposed to different demographics. They're being exposed to really great debates in these places. And now they want to make these demographics more homogenous. They're going after student visas. And now they talk about revoking almost. It's very frightening and revoking the brain drain that's going to cause. Yeah. The brain drain that's
brain drain, money drain. It's like we're trying to write ourselves out of the script as the global leader in everything. It's like we're just trying to take ourselves out at the kneecap ourselves.
Yes, exactly. And on that note, on the student visas, like we should be happy we won the soft power battle, that we have 270 or so thousand Chinese students, and that Xi Jinping's own daughter wants to study here, right? We should be happy with that. Instead, we want to deport these students. And there's an example of literally so this New York Times story talked about this Chinese brilliant scientist in the 1950s, worked with Oppenheimer, did a lot of work for the US. And we deported him. And what ended up happening was he went to China and helped jumpstart the technological revolution in China and help them become a superpower.
That's a great example.
And we don't know how many thousands of people, millions, we could be reporting that could have a seismic change on the course of world history, that we don't know the damage we're doing right now. And it's just like those anecdotes like that. It's just like, what are we doing here, man?
What really frightens me about this too, Ahmed, is that, when you think about all the soft targets that terrorists or other countries could target our infrastructure, our power plants, et cetera, it's as though Project 2025 and this administration is targeting every weak spot. Like, is what he's doing to universities illegal? Some of it's illegal. Some of it's just vicious because he can.
Yeah, right? and they found all the loopholes, all the legal levers to pull. That's what they spent the last 4 years doing in hiding, right? And Russell Vought specifically spent the last 4 years looking. He knows law. He knows what to exploit. And that's again, like what we talked about in our initial conversations, where I expected a more methodical approach. And I really think that the Musk coming in, I thought basically Vogt was going to come in here, do the target specific statutes, get it up to the Supreme Court, have Chief Justice Roberts give legal legitimacy to their authoritarianism. Instead, I think Musk caused a lot of that to backfire. And instead of really taking advantage of a lot of these loopholes, he went in there, the chainsaw wielding Icarus, right? The guy that go up there and he took all the heat. He took all the political backlash from what he did. It started tanking Tesla. It started to the point where he's now out, right? And now from the outside attacking Trump's bill. So we're seeing some interesting dynamics there. But overall, I mean, they were trying to exploit these loopholes. But again, I am hardened by just the foolish way they went about it, because although they are still pursuing Project 2025, they set themselves back by a lot with Musk's, now we can say with more confidence, drug-addled nonsense.
Thank you. I wanted to get to that. Exactly. We talked about it. There was like a manic, crazy, reckless, aggressive, flavor to the whole thing. The way he was jumping up and screaming and pumping his fist and Nazi saluting, and it now it sort of all makes sense. The guy was high off his gourd.
Exactly. Homeboy was on drugs the whole time. Who could have guessed?
Right. I mean, he uses so much ketamine that he can't pee anymore. I mean, he's got a bag of, the New York Times has got a bag of 20 different drugs that he carries around with him. I mean, I think he's practicing constant polypharmacy. Yeah, exactly. And it was insane to read it in print, like in the second paragraph in the lead of this story, like that he's been taking so much ketamine, he has bladder issues, he has Adderall, he's taken magic mushrooms, he's just been drugged out. And the timing is also interesting to me, because I think there might be some knifing going on from, like, maybe Trump personally doesn't hate Musk much at the moment, but a lot of the White House aides have reportedly disliked his baby for a long time. And I think they started leaking on him as he was on his way out. And all those drug stories, I don't think those came from Musk's friends. Let's just say that. I think they came from people who came into contact with him. I don't think Doge Bros are leaking on Musk. I think now we're seeing how Musk is behaving against this bill, calling it a disgusting abomination. I don't know how much more Trump's like narcissism will be able to tolerate this level of disrespect. Frankly, I don't know how long it takes till there's a full blown beef, because this is just.
What I heard was that, I mean, there was a circle of aides around Trump who hated him, and they got Trump to agree to pull that NASA nominee that Elon Musk wanted. And that was clearly a sign of punishment. That's kicking him as he's leaving, like with the door slamming him in the ass as he left. That's kind of what was happening. No, I think I don't think there's any doubt. I mean, look at all the things we're missing from the bill. He didn't get his EV thing. Yep, he wanted Starlink to be in charge of the new FAA, and they denied that to him. Mm-hmm. He wanted to have his stay extended, and they wouldn't. And then the NASA head. So everything that he wanted, they said no to. That's why it's a disgusting abomination of a bill, right? Yeah. it's this personal motive. Musk is not religiously concerned about the debt. All right. He didn't like the EV. If he had those EV subsidies in there, he probably would be much happier. But literally a key part that incentivizes consumers to buy his cars is not in the bill. And like you said, that NASA nomination taken away. And again, like also that one part with the Starlink thing is interesting, because one of the reasonings I read for why Trump didn't want it was the appearance of a conflict of interest, which is obviously hilarious to me given the crypto stuff and the foreign nationals buying access. That's one part of it. But also, it just shows they're still thinking through political dynamics. They're still thinking through backlash. They're still they're still thinking through political ramifications for what they're doing. And again, that doesn't happen in hugely authoritarian regimes, right? It's just showing that the political gravity of the world is still active, right? It's just on that the hope stuff we've been talking about before, where it's just there's still real world dynamics that are impacting and restraining Trump, the legal stuff, these losses. And I just think, the fact that Musk is out is an example of the fact that they did indeed set their authoritarian ambitions back, because if they had been succeeding,
Musk would have stayed.
I just one quick point. I know John must say something, but it's really Trump, isn't it? In other words, Trump brought in Musk. Trump just decided to increase tariffs on aluminum and steel, like just on a Friday night. And I feel like the administration is cleaning up after him all the time. I mean, that wasn't a plan to have Musk come in and do all this crazy thing and cut up the VA and the Social Security Department. And, right? I mean, I wonder if so Trump is a little bit more like Mussolini than Hitler. He's a kind of wildly impulsive figure who has fantastic instincts for amassing power and for extorting people and pressuring and being corrupt. But he's also dumb and impulsive and irresponsible.
All over the place. There was actually a New Republic article saying that he's more like Mussolini than Hitler. I was trying to reach that author to invite him over for the show, because I think it's actually a good point. I mean, not all authoritarian dictators have exactly the same personalities. It's like you're saying he's sort of more like Hitler with ADD, in a more histrionic kind of.
I mean, it's like, you're right. There's like a similar personality sets overall, but it's like, he's got this unique impulsivity, foolishness, also a deep desire to be loved, and other things that kind of also restrict him a little bit, that make him want to hate the unpopularity just at a core level, and wanting to not like piss off his base and things like that. Whereas like other dictators just don't care. They're down to like Putin is just down to just control, But I think you're right. I think he's a lot more impulsive, and we're dealing with that, like the tariffs and the vault, like we've talked about how we're living within the volatility of his mind, and now this bill, another impulse, because he wanted literally a big beautiful bill. They named it the big. I was shook when I looked. I thought they were just calling it that, and then I looked at the website. It is called One Big Beautiful Bill Act.
Yep. Yeah, right.
And he literally named it that, and it's like, oh, you guys are just losers. You guys are just following the whims of this. You guys are just following the whims of this impulsive lunatic in the White House who just wanted to name it this, and then you stuff everything in here that's dividing the Republicans in the Senate. One side thinks the cuts aren't steep enough. Other side, we have Hawley randomly talking about Medicaid cuts being too steep with Collins and Murkowski. Like, he went about this in a way. It's almost obviously not comparison because the other bill actually was good, but the Build Back Better bill, another BBB bill, I guess, but it might have the same fate. Who knows? Where they try to do too much at once, that divided the caucus. And this big beautiful bill, or reverse Robin Hood Act, is what I call it.
Yeah,
they're trying to do way too much, and it's divided, and it's going to go through some major changes in the Senate. I don't see it surviving in the Senate without major changes. And if it does survive, then they're literally ending their majorities in the midterms.
You're right. They're robbing from the poor. They're robbing from the poor and giving to the rich. And you wonder when that's going to have some political gravity, right? How many millions of voters, right, need to be damaged before they start to react against him? And it's actually an open question, because it's amazing how these things, and like, oh, it's the Biden economy overhang. I mean, there's all these ways they can phrase it and brainwash people into not seeing what's right in front of their eyes. Like, I know people whose relatives died of COVID who don't blame Trump. You know what I mean? So when people lose their jobs, when they lose their insurance, are they going to blame Trump? He is to blame when the prices go up. Right. Are they going to blame Trump? I mean, I think it's actually an open question in some ways.
Yeah, I think it is. And I think, these people, they wanted lower prices. They're going to instead get higher prices, and then they might get kicked off their insurance. And we're seeing, like, it really is a literal robbery of the poor. Right. Like, the CBO, really, one of their previous analysis said the bottom 10% will see a reduction in household resources, while the top 10% sees an increase. Yeah, that's a straight robbery. The almost $1 trillion in SNAP and Medicaid cuts, and then even more Obamacare, and then you have $3.7 trillion in tax cuts. It's just a direct transfer of wealth. It's literally, and there's no way to spin that. And we're seeing that in this bill. And another thing that's interesting, just on when the political ramifications are felt, one of the last minute changes to the bill before it passed the House, the Medicaid work requirements weren't supposed to start until 2029. And people in the House moved it up to 2026.
Yeah.
Which made the CBO numbers worse in this latest. It's like, okay, even more people are going to lose insurance. And not only that, it's like, okay, it's like these people just don't care about their career. It's like Trump doesn't have to run again, right? But like, you guys are going to doom your party now because there's going to be millions of people losing health insurance within the 2 years of your next 2028 election.
Well, there's one thing though, because of course it's ballooning the deficit while cutting Medicaid and keeping the tax cuts from last time. And because the old days, right? One of the gimmicks is, he passed the tax cuts in 2017, saying they end in 2024, and that's how they're able to keep it down as far as how much it contributed to the deficit. But he's extending them. But he's also, because he's got this evil genius that he is, he's also not taxing tips, right?
Yeah.
Not taxing overtime, and not taxing loan payments on cars built in the United States. And that's going to be popular. No tax on Social Security. I mean, we can't afford it, but that's actually going to get old people liking what he's doing.
Yeah. Oh, I didn't even know that was in the bill.
Well, John, I looked at the Times, and I looked at this, one of these foundations did a whole analysis, and it's really so he's hedging his bets.
He is, but the thing is, it's just the overall impact of the bill might have recessionary impacts to the point where it's like again, we do this kind of deficit spending in crises, right? Like it's basic Keynesian economics. Right. You want to invest, do stimulus when we're down, bring us back out. But this, even Trump's the Inflation Reduction Act, the deficit, the 2.4 trillion after you include the cuts of spending, adding to the deficit, it's insane. And bond markets are already being the volatility with the tariffs. You compound that with this, and then you have the US dollar dropping, and then you go and you essentially are in a situation where Moody's downgrading our debt. How can you trust? Who's going to invest long term in the U.S.? You have tariff volatility, you have debt ballooning that we're clearly never going to. We say we're going to expire these cuts, and we just make them permanent. You might as well just factor into the estimates that they're permanent, and we're in a situation where it's going to eventually collapse. This is the one moment where I'm actually thinking about the deficit a lot, and people also, funny enough, people act like it's a Republican thing to care about the deficit, but Bill Clinton. We all.
That's right.
I wasn't there, so I didn't get to live. I wasn't that sentient. I was like 1 year old when he first won. But from what I hear, it was a great time, and he balanced the budget. It was awesome.
I wrote a biography of Bill Clinton, so I know this, and I interviewed some of the people on his team, on his economic team. There's some interesting side stories too. They were amazed that he read the entire budget cover to cover and seemed to retain everything, and had all of these incredibly advanced questions and theories. And not only did they balance the budget, they increased benefits. They added basically a negative income tax that gave income to people that earned under a certain amount of money. So he actually elevated the opposite of what we're doing here, right? It was a real Robin Hood. Okay, so maybe the wealthy might have paid a little more, but he lifted about 20 million people out of poverty with a negative income tax. If you earned less than $25,000 a year, the government actually gave you a few $1,000s.
No, the earned income tax credit. That was his thing.
Yes, brilliant. Exactly. Yeah, and I didn't know you were a Clinton biographer. That's super cool. I mean, because I think one of my theories is that although not on some of the social stuff, he made some, some concessions there, the criminal justice, things like that. But I think in 2028, Democrats need to adopt some of his reformist language when it comes to government, right? Him and Gore had they had the real Doge, right? They had an actual Doge, right? That was actually reforming and cutting and making government more efficient.
Right. And it's government.
And I think Democrats can run on that with a combination of Obama's kind of reformist, changing it's about changing the system, not just creating the status quo. But that's a whole different conversation. But I think, just given everything that's happening, I think Democrats are actually going to be in a position where they'll be able to make that case going into 2028 of let's go back and make this stuff more efficient and rebuild.
And there's so
government.
much long-term damage, and you wonder if people are going to associate it with Trump and the Republican Party. But there's so much long-term damage, like you talked about. We don't even know how many forms of cancer we're not going to cure, right?
Yeah.
Because we cut American science off at the knees. So when you die of cancer, you won't be saying, if only 10 years ago we had kept the scientists, they could have cured this cancer and I wouldn't be dying. It's hard to put those things together. One of the things that's happening too in the bond market, as you said, is because of all the factors you said, the deficit, the downgrade, and the volatility, that there's less demand for our bonds, which means we have to pay higher interest. Yep. That's the thing that could really sink the whole government, the whole economy, exactly. Because suddenly, if you've ever had to refinance, if you've ever refinanced a house, wow, the interest rate's down 3 points. I can pay $500 less a month. I feel rich. Well, this is the opposite. If you owe trillions of dollars and the interest rate goes up 2 or 3 points, that means that suddenly you're paying hundreds of billions of dollars in interest that you could have been spending on other things or even on tax cuts. It's just extra money. You're just paying more money for your money. But it also, that 10-year bond determines the interest rates you pay when you buy a car,
exactly.
When you buy a house, on your credit card. So it's a tax on everybody.
Yes.
We're all going to pay higher interest rates for everything. Small business loans. It's going to be a tax on all of us. And will people, again, put that together? Will they connect 2 + 2 = 4?
If more of us talk about it, and most importantly, if Democrats talk about that and frame it, right? Because what we need to really put in the forefront is that interest rate aspect. People think about Jerome Powell and the Fed when they think about their interest rates. And sometimes it might not be as common knowledge that the bond market, impacts these things. And with that happening at the same time, that could offset so much of these supposed, mini gains that some of these people might get. When it comes to no tax on tip, but like, let's say you're an IHOP worker. I only shout out IHOP because I used to be a waiter there. So it's no shade to anyone working at IHOP. But basically, if you're an IHOP worker and let's say you might be on Medicaid, but your tips are getting untaxed, but you forget to file paperwork for your these new eligibility requirements because you're so busy you don't have access to a dedicated computer or whatever, and then you get kicked off your healthcare, and then you don't know you're kicked off, and then now all these claims. You know how it happens. Like if you get your healthcare canceled, and you had claims in that last month that you were canceled, that becomes bills. And it's like, there's so many people who are going to get caught up in the system, in this new system, and have dire impacts that totally offset any potential gains for the poor in America.
Ahmed, I just wanted to ask you, since we're heading into another election, do you see any emerging leaders for the Democratic Party?
I think, we see obviously a lot of the governors are good contenders. We got like Wes Moore. We see, Pritzker. We see, Gretchen Whitmer, although she did, I think, harm herself a little bit with the Trump stuff. But honestly, I'm biased. I think I like Buttigieg the most. I don't know about the, people have concerns about the electability, but I just think basically what I'm looking for is someone that just doesn't need, you don't have to poll test the truth. So just say it with your chest, say what you feel. And also I don't need, like, if you need a script, then go, like, I think I don't know if I said it here before, but like, if you need a script, go into theater or go into acting, right? If you need a consultant or if you need someone to tell you what to say, then you're in the wrong business. I'm just looking for Democratic leaders that just know this stuff. When they talk, you can tell they're living and breathing it. They didn't need talking points shown to them before they went on a TV hit. They just live and breathe this stuff and they care. And, there's a lot of different people out there. I mean, AOC, of course, is great, but, there's, whether that's electable because people might view her as too far left, even though she's not that crazy far left, to be honest. I really, my personal favorite, but between me and you guys and, obviously the entire audience you have here is Buttigieg. Buttigieg is my current favorite just because I actually genuinely want that guy to be president.
Yeah, well, he's so smart and so balanced. I have a Pete Buttigieg for president T-shirt for about 2 weeks in 2018. I was I was on the Buttigieg train.
Yeah, I just think he's great. But obviously I'm open to any Democrats, but he's the one that when I see him, he went on these bro podcast episode and just really broke it down. Like if you're able to walk into any space, feel comfortable, and convert people, that's what you need. And you don't have to be that antagonistic. He's really understanding of people with different opinions. And that's kind of what I think we need. You need fighters, but you also need people who can sit down with someone from the other side and like not belittle them and have a conversation and sway them.
Yeah,
he's very Bill Clinton-like, actually, in that way, because
Exactly,
Bill Clinton was extraordinarily intelligent, like off the map intelligent, and Buttigieg obviously is too. Like he learned like Swedish in a weekend because for some reason, but yet he was a man of the people, so he could break things down in a very folksy, way. I mean, that famous moment in the debate with Bush where they said, "Oh, how has the deficit affected you?" And he made some, and then Bill Clinton walks up to the woman and gets right closer. Tell me how it's affected you.
Yeah, right.
So he combined
with
intelligence.
I don't mean to. I guess I'm taking a different tack. He reminds me more of Obama than Clinton. There's something about the way that Buttigieg speaks in perfect paragraphs. I mean, Bill Clinton's a great orator. Don't get me wrong, but Obama had that way of keeping the audience still. Basically, they could feel the suspense of every sentence leading to a conclusion. And Buttigieg does that effortlessly the way Obama did. One other thing I wanted to run by you, Ahmed, maybe you can help us with this in the future, but the midterms, it seems to me, is make or break. Yeah. If we don't get back at least one house of Congress, then the destruction will be really undeniable coming up. And I was thinking, John and I were talking about, as you know, it is a year and 4 months from now or so, whatever it is.
Oh, thank God it's getting closer.
I know. It's to start spotlighting every week someone running in a competitive House race. Just every week. Maybe they'll come on the show, maybe they won't. But to spotlight it and ask everyone in the audience, it may be in a different state, but support this person. We have to get the House back. I mean, what do you think? Could this be a strategy that Democrats could adopt?
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. I think highlighting these young leaders that are running, especially there's younger, newer ones popping up that are great in these swing districts, because I think a lot of these districts are going to be in play a lot more than people expect. Maybe on par with or bigger than 2018 of a wave, because this is the damage they're doing is just so much worse than 2017.
Yeah, I really.
So I like the idea.
I'm kind of bullish on the Senate, even though everyone says that it's a tough one. It depends. If there's a disaster and the economy tanks and the Democrats just keep talking about Liberation Day, I think we could really take back the Congress. I do think it's possible.
Yeah, I think it is possible. And unfortunately, there's all these recipes for economic disaster happening right now. And I think, honestly, we might look back at a butterfly effect moment where, if someone from back, if there's a Back to the Future film on it, someone would have wanted to travel back and stop that reporter from asking Trump about taco, the Trump always chickens out thing, because I feel like that moment, Trump heard that, and I think the likelihood of him retreating on certain things might decrease. I think it hit him. I've never seen him that angry in a while, at least. It's to a question of being asked about chickening out. I think, who knows, that might set us in a place where some of these tariffs aren't coming back now. He's not, he's just out of not wanting to chicken out. That dude's ego was irreparably bruised in that moment. So I just think we might be in a place where we head to that. And again, I don't know. There was some cosmic luck that happened to help Trump win in 2024, like the assassination attempt and Biden's debate and all these things that just literally swept him in. It's like he didn't even have to do anything. It just swept him in. And I think this time it's feeling like the opposite's happening, where all these factors are going against him and his administration. It's obviously self-caused, but it feels to me that he's operating in a place where he doesn't care about the political ramifications of what he does, but the people in the House and the Senate, they have to deal with those political ramifications, and I think they're cooked. But we'll see.
Once again, you're supplying us with some hopium. You're actually one of our chief hopium suppliers.
Yeah, we had to get one hopium mention in there. I'm sure the people who watch our previous ones are like, why haven't they done it yet? You got it now.
There you go. There it is. If you were waiting for it, there it is. And that's good because we're out of time. So I'm glad I got it in there.
I am too. And listen, a couple things about first. I love the fact that you're thinking like a psychologist, because that moment with the taco is what we would call a narcissistic injury that then causes someone with Trump's personality disorder to reorganize how they're being seen. And maybe that's why he bumped up the tariffs on aluminum and steel a few days later on a Friday night. The other thing is our audience should know that you recently got married. And so we just wanted a shout out to your wife, telling her that she made a very good decision.
Thank you. I'm gonna have to tell her that directly after this. That's the only thing she can ask how to go and be like, oh, they said that.
You're a very lucky woman.
No, she's incredible, and I'm lucky as hell to have her. It was an awesome wedding, and I'm a happy guy.
Good. Well,
we're happy for you.
Yeah.
Thank you. And thank you for having me back. I know, like you said, I'm tied George Conway. Maybe we keep this going. I might one up him. Maybe we'll be in a competition.
I wouldn't be surprised.
It's in the cards.
We really do want to keep in touch with you as this process evolves. Because because you're so astute, and two, because we need the hopium.
Yeah. I mean, we do. And honestly, a lot of the stuff I know we're over time, but a lot of the stuff we talked about has played out in the way that we predicted and talked about. Musk exiting, the tariffs backfiring, the political support, like everything we said. So it's like the hopium is actually now very practical and data backed hopium.
Good point. Good point.
So I think the hope is now being justified as practicality.
It's no longer a drug. It's just reality.
Yeah, exactly. And we'll see if we keep it going.
Well, that's why your hopium is the best.
Thank you.
Thanks,
All
right. See you next time. Good
right.
seeing you. Bye-bye.
Good to see you.
What a pleasure, as always.
Yeah, really. A pleasure. Really, he's fun to talk to, and he's insightful, and he really has his finger on the pulse of things. He really has he's a very broad thinker. He really sees the implications of things down the line, and it'll be interesting to keep in touch with him as this thing develops, and we'll see if the hopium, if it's opium or if it's reality.
Reality-based hope.
Well, Harry, I guess that brings us to the shrink wrap portion of our show. What have we learned this week?
I think we learned more lessons in humility. And I've been thinking about humility a lot this week, because I've had such strong feelings about what Trump and his administration are doing to Harvard and to higher education since I basically went to college and never left my whole life. I've worked in universities. I feel so impressed and proud of what Ukraine has done in the midst of their being so horribly pummeled by Russia. My heart goes out to those immigrants being disappeared and pulled off the streets by men in masks at their immigration hearings. And my humility really comes from a sense of not being able to do that much about it, except to be responsible, to think about it, to do something. For me, I've said this before, to me, it's the show, which is allowing me to do something. If we weren't doing this show, I'd be doing something else each week to do something. But what we can do is limited. But we can stay aware. We can be aware of the limits of what we can do, but not to forget that it's important that we do something.
Yeah.
And so I'm humbled and I'm demoralized, but I'm also, as our guest suggested, I'm also feeling some realistic hope that all of Trump's impulsivity will bring down his program of dismantling our institutions and our democracy.
I know what you mean about feeling sort of discouraged. I think both of, just to mention, I think you and I are both very physically tired this week, and for other reasons, and we're just working too hard. But you get worn down by some of these things. But I do think that one of the things that I do take some hope from, even though it is incredibly disturbing, is these scenes of people in the streets pushing back. Right, that woman censuring those ICE agents who then leave. I think that this battle is really going to be fought out in the streets. You know, it's going to be school by school, you know, restaurant by restaurant, neighborhood by neighborhood. Are we going to say no to these Gestapo agents with masks just having their way? You know, with anyone they want. I mean, there's so many stories of citizens who they snatch, of people who were here legally who they snatch. You know, I mean, we don't have time to show all the TikToks, but, you know, there was this one girl who was just riding her bike down First Avenue, you know, and they picked her up and threw her in jail. They don't even know why. Because she didn't have her ID on her, because she was riding her bike. So she didn't have ID with her. You know, sometimes you wear those bike pants, you don't have and she said, look, here's my bag. You can check. I don't have it with me. They kept saying, show us your ID, ma'am. Show us your ID, ma'am. We're going to take you because I'm riding my bike. I don't have my ID. And then she actually filmed herself in jail. I don't know how she did that. Like I said, I thought they take away your phone when you go to jail. But I mean, it's happening all over. And it's scary to think about having to stand up to masked, armed, brutal men who have no limits and who push anyone down, arrest anyone. But I really feel like this battle really is going to be like Argentina. You know what I mean? With the mothers holding the pictures of I mean, this is going to be taken to the streets.
Well, I think fighting ICE will be on the streets, but don't forget, we've had the courts fighting back. It's not just going to be in the streets. It's also going to be in the courts. And also, as we talked about with our great guests, there's a midterm election coming up. And if the economy is doing poorly, we can take back the House and the Senate. And John and I are committed on the show to spotlighting people who are running in competitive districts to support them, so that we have a positive outcome in the midterm. So there's new legislators, there are the courts, and then against these thugs in the street, there's the people. And I think this is where resistance is, I think.
Right. These are the battle lines. These are the front lines. These are the barricades.
Yeah.
Louis, I think this is the beginning of a beautiful friendship.
It certainly seemed to be the beginning of a beautiful friendship. But this week, the relationship between Donald Trump and Elon Musk came to a bitter end. It began with what seemed like mutual admiration. One wannabe billionaire with a national following, the other a socially awkward richest man in the world. When they got together, people said it couldn't last. And they were right, it couldn't last. But it was a relationship that shook the world. Some said it was a friendship. Some said it was a romance. But from a clinical standpoint, it was a psycho-bromance. Real relationships are when two people admire qualities in each other. But in a psycho-bromance, each person thinks he's looking in the mirror. I have 5 children from 4 wives. I have 11 children from women I've paid off. We're so alike. But after the fentanyl, the weird 5-year-old in the Oval Office, the leaping on stage, the chainsaw, and the Hitler salute, eventually Trump came to see that Musk wasn't exactly like him. And so they parted company back in the Oval Office. Musk calls the big, beautiful bill a disgusting abomination, and Trump withdraws Musk's nominee to head NASA. But before we call time of death to declare this relationship dead, remember that Musk is walking off with all of our data his coterie of incels took from Social Security. So their friendship will live on and on in infamy. Well, we here at Shrinking Trump, with great compassion and sympathy to the end of this relationship, have managed to snag an interview with the departing multi-billionaire mogul, leaving the White House after causing so much damage. And we wanted to check in with him from a clinical perspective, with empathy and sympathy, and wanting to understand just what this experience of breaking up with Donald Trump means to him. Welcome, Mr. Musk. How are you feeling?
I feel great. I feel great, buddy. Take a few of these, buddy, and you're high as a kite. So I'm good. How are you?
Isn't that keeping you from experiencing grief or pain?
Well, no, then I take some of these. So if I take some of these with some of these, then I don't have to feel anything except how smart I am.
I see. Well, we here at Shrinking Trump are hoping you're okay.
I'm great, buddy. I'm more than okay. Whoa, woo, woo, woo. I'm MAGA. I'm hot-blooded meth MAGA.
I see.
In fact, let me just tell you how happy and how high I am. Hit it, Rex. Yeah. Hey. I'm getting stronger. The country's getting weaker too. Boom, 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 boom. You know, I want to get me higher. Woo! I want to get me higher. Oh, yeah. And take the country lower. Woo! Yeah,
I guess you're really doing okay, Elon.
Woo!
Hey, you know?
Yeah.
Hey, here's to medicating anxiety and grief, folks.
Hey.
Thanks for watching. Remember, we won't be here next week, but we will be here in 2 weeks after John takes a vacation and also comes down from all the fentanyl.
Woo!
See you then. Take care.
Get you higher. Ooh, chocolate, ooh, chocolate, ooh.